Hello, everyone, and welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Penn State 2025 Workforce Education and Development OD&C Conference, hosted by the Workforce Education and Development and Organization Development and Change Programs at Pennsylvania State University. This is an event sponsored by Penn State College of Education, Penn State Office of the Provost for Educational Equity, and Penn State University Park Allocation Committee. My name is Halima Hatta. I'm a doctoral student in the Workforce Education and Development Program at Penn State. I will be moderating today's session alongside with my colleagues Jose, a PhD candidate in the Learning Design and Technology program at Penn State. We are excited to engaging with you using the features of the Zoom platform at the end of this presentation. There will be a QA session. If you want the presenter to address your question, please type it into the QA box. If you encounter any technical issue during the webinar, please let us know using the chat box. Our online Master of Professional Studies in Organization Development and Change is designed for professionals who want to gain the skills and knowledge necessary to lead organizational change effectively. Additionally, we offer a PhD program in workforce education and development with construction in human resource development and organization development. Since 2021, we have established this biannual free conference featuring experts from around the globe. Today, we are excited to present OD essence to carry forward into our future by Dr. David Jamieson. After decades of difficulties understanding OD, we need to clarify what is the core of OD and what is necessary for us to be doing OD. And with all the new challenges present now and coming in the future, we need to work on all the types of change we face with OD clarity. Now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming our speaker today, Dr. David Jamieson. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that good introduction. I want to start by saying that I'm very appreciative of the team that has organized and created all of this. It's a very useful collection, and it really can help the future of our fields. And I think that's very critical in these days. And I even heard some of my own colleagues today during different sessions, and I was taking valuable notes because you never stop learning. And I love to know how people are thinking today about what the world we're in today compared to all of the years we've been together in our fields. And I'm very excited about what this can bring together. So given all that, I want to start with I really want to talk about what I've now developed as the third version of my thinking about what is the core essence of OD. But I want to talk about two context pieces first. I want to talk about the world that we are now operating in, and number two, I want to also say something about my concerns over the 60 years that I've been in the field about OD and its impact and its overall valuable use. And those are the two context pieces. Then I want to share how I've broken down the essence these days. And twice I'd like to stop for a few minutes and just ask a question to anyone who's willing to give their answer to it, because I'd like to hear a few things from the people that are here. And then at the very end, I'll share with you what I experimented with the last couple of times I've been out in the field working on change projects. And and I think they always need more development, but it's a way in which I'm describing how I build all the essence together in a methodology to work on change. So I'll share that at the very end. So so why do I want to share? I want to tell you a little bit. A lot of this is personal to me, and it was an important time in my own life and my own career to try to put some of this stuff together. So I want to tell you what I'm trying to share for you today. I want to share my concerns from the 60 years of OD work. Now, I will also tell you how much I love about OD, but there are concerns about our field and the professionalism of it and the way in which it has and has not really produced great outcomes. And I want what a different world we are in now, and we will continue to be in for quite a while. And I want to share that as well, because I think these two things are the context in which the rest of this is going to make some sense. My thinking of our core essence, that is all that we need. I believe that's all that we need, because I think the best learning I've ever had about doing change in organizations, communities, or any kind of human systems, OD has brought the best stuff forward, in my opinion, over these years. The question is how we go about doing it hasn't always been neat and clean. And then the last piece of this is my recent thinking on how I'm changing change myself, because I believe we all need to change how we get some of this change taken care of in the current VUCA world. So the next one is we start to move in my concerns. So I'll share these very bluntly with you. One, I've been always very supportive of OD. And I've been very, very lucky in my career because I started when I was about 20 years old learning about OD, and it was very early in the cycle of OD. And and then by the time I was finishing my bachelor's degree, I was already accepted for a doctoral program at UCLA. I had to move across the country, and I had some of the early founders on my faculty there. And that is what got me started into one career, and I never left this career. So most people have done two or three things and then they found their way into OD. I was just very lucky that I that that I think that's what I've been very lucky about was getting that kind of a start and then not wanting to leave this field and this career. Um, so I've always been supported, and my concerns are what I think has caused some of our difficulties. It has decreased some of our popularity. If you look at over the years, there are decades when OD was really powerful and a lot of people were trying to make it happen. And then a lot other times now there's less and less people. There's people who stop using the name OD. There's people who have separated themselves from OD, but they started in OD. Um, and the lack of better success statistics. I mean, most of those studies and researches, I don't know if anybody has the right percent of what was success and what wasn't. Depends a lot on how they're measuring things. But in general, we've never had really high statistics on all of our work creating the desired outcomes. And then how parts of our original field left us and they don't use our name anymore. I mean, early coaching was way before ICF, by the way. And every founder that I worked with taught us all how to do coaching because you can't change organizations without doing some coaching to people. And so coaching used to be with us, but then of course it's all been separated ever since. And then and then the other one that is so interesting to me, because it's one of the areas I've spent a lot of my career in, is organization design. And back in the time when I was learning and the other three or four doctoral programs, they were all teaching org design as part of OD. And then that also got separated and has its own population. So that's one concern. We've taken in nearly everything that we can to include an OD, rather than having built agreements on what we are, how we work, common competencies, key purposes, and our essence. I know that there are committees that I've even been on over the years in professional groups who have tried to make this happen, but it has never taken effect in the 60 years I've been around. And so part of what happens is OD has become confusing to a lot of people. And part of it, especially the people who have to hire us to help them, because they don't really know when 15 different people have been there and they all say they do OD work, but none of them feel like they're the same. So I think one of the problems is we've created this as a field. The next one is we've also never had one large membership in a professional way, a form of certifications. And yes, I know there's been 3 of them that I'm aware of that were created. They never took hold and they never got that many members being certified with their systems. Nor did we have any kind of a governance body that gained influence. In other words, when you think about professions, which I think we should be a profession, but when you think about ones like doctors and lawyers and others, they have professional groups that are large. When they speak up, they have influence, and they have common ethics and they have common certifications and things like that. So I'm just saying, as long as I've been with it, I've been in debates on this forever. But I do think they're the concerns I have. And here we are in a time when, you know what, we might have the best tools and the best thinking to actually make change happen. But I want us to be able to do it in a solid way that people start to respect OD people more often. Our education programs also didn't help. They've never been nearly the same. And I'll say that my own experiences, I have taught in 6 or 7 different university OD programs at the master's level and at the doctor level over my career. And I can tell you, every time I look at curricula next to next, you'll find 1 to 3 things that are very foundational and very common. But then everything else is done by whoever is the faculty at that particular organization. Because again, there's no governance in a field that says there are core courses that have to happen to have a degree in OD, but we've never been there. So instead, we've showed the world a mixture that has actually helped to create some of the confusion that I think we deal with now. So, my last one, I believe, is we continue to fragment the field ever since the last couple of decades as well. We have overloaded it with models, techniques, definitions. My last count was 47 different definitions. We have subgroups, very small subgroups that take a piece of OD and then they sometimes just work in a subgroup or sometimes they leave our OD professional groups and they move into something else. And there's been unsimilar thinking of what OD is. So that's why so many people in my life, I can't tell you how many thousand times somebody has asked me, so tell me, what is OD? And this is after everybody's been working in it for a long time. So these are the things that I think it's held back only the stableness and the professionalist and the reputation of a really strong professional field that we've messed up. But I know many people I've worked with, I know many people have had very successful work. And that's why I'm carrying away from this what I think is our core essence that we need to carry into the future. And that'll be part of what we're talking about today. So our different world. over the last few decades, I think we've experienced some very significant things that we haven't experienced before. And one of those are the number of changes in our workforces. The diversities is part of that. The different generations at the same time is different than it used to be. There's way more mindsets happening now in the workforce about how people think about whether they're just working to get the money, or whether they love the work they do, or whether they hate the work they do, but they've got to make some money. And then the voice question. There's so many people in the workforce over the years, and I know this from my father and my older sister who were ahead of me. They would do a lot of work in a lot of places, and they would always say yes, whatever the boss has to say, but that's not what the workforce does today. So I think it's changed quite a bit these days, and that's very important. And I heard part of John Bennett's this morning too, and he had a very nice slide that was talking about the same things. That what is it that's affecting our workforces and our workplaces, and so he had some good thoughts about that. The one that I think we're all being hit with is significant changes in all forms of technology, whether it's digital, whether it's machines, whether it's automations, or now it's the new challenge of how's the best ways that AI can help everything in our world, and how can it even help us in our OD and change work as well. Um, but the significant change are happening way faster. There's lots more money going through technology than there is gone through human systems anymore, in terms of the way in which money is being spent inside of organizations. And so the speed and the regularity and the consistency of technological changes is happening at the same time that we have all these shifts in our workforce. So now we've got two. The third is the amounts, types, and speeds of all changes. That is, when change used to happen during my whole career, it happened slower because our environment was way more stable. Up into the 80s, maybe not so much after the 80s. But the reality is the stable environment slows down the number and the speeds of a lot of changes. But when you start having all the outside things changing at the same time, there are needs to make inside changes. Now you've got them all overlapping. And some are digital, some are transformative, some are systemic, and some are still our old-fashioned types of piecemeal, where we run multiple projects to work with different departments, and we lose the impact of doing systemic work. And so a lot of that's been taking place over time. But now we're into something new. The other thing that's interesting is I used to read Futurist magazine all the time. I thought this stuff was really interesting about the way people made the environment into categories, and then they always studied and experimented with different things to see where was it going to be 10 and 20 years later. The way I feel about it mostly right now is that all sectors of environments have been changing, and they're changing simultaneously. So whether it's government, economy, I mean, societies, different social values, our climate, and our global relationships, and more, are all the categories of what it makes up our environment. That is, they all have impacts on almost any kind of community, human system, or organization. And so with all sectors changing, I'll tell you, I can't remember until about a decade or two ago where everything was all changing in the same years at the same time. So that also makes a difference in terms of the different world we're working in. And the other thing that we all know about, whoops, went too far. Here we go. The other one is the very disruptive worldwide health pandemic that continues to change mindsets even today and has affected many other aspects of our world. There are people who still feel that they are continuing with something left over from COVID-19. There are dozens of new versions of COVID-19. It's going to be with us in different forms. But the thing that happened is we closed everything down for a while, and it changed a lot of people's mindsets. And it made people think very differently about their life and about their working life and about all the rest of their life. And these people have made those changes. And today, there are systems that are still fighting to bring everybody back into the office and still losing employees because of it. So this is the way to think about what's so different in this kind of a context that we have to work in. So anyone can unload for just a minute. And how about an example that you have where our the new world is affecting us? I mean, I just had some simple ideas, but maybe you have one or two examples. We can only do a couple and stay within our time, but please, if anybody wants to speak up and share with us one of an example, that would be helpful. And I can't see all the people, so I'm not sure. But if someone wants to just, put their audio back on and just say something to share with all of us. Okay, or if you don't want to do that, that's certainly okay. I will go to the next one. There will be other times when you can ask questions too at the end. So I think this is a very different time for all of us. I wished I had more years, frankly, because I think it would be very exciting to move into the future. But I do think it's so different that I've already had to rethink this whole thought about how do we change. And VUCA was taught to us a long time ago in the 1990s, but you know what? It's really become real now. It's really different now than it was when it was first being taught. And how we need to change and how we need change to change is really, I think, one of the most important challenges for us in our fields. Because I think we have the right thinking and the right values and the right methodologies to make it work in a VUCA world. But at the same time, I think we have to pull together what is the core so we stop confusing people and so we start making more of the outcomes hitting the desired goals that we're trying to reach. So this is new thinking. I started this back in the year 2000 and I wrote something back then, but there was too many items and it didn't make sense to me 15 years later. So I'm talking about what I've been thinking about lately and just see what you think about it because you may have some questions and you may have some other thoughts about it too. So I start with common purposes. That is, whatever work we're doing, it probably needs to be part of the common purposes we are doing rather than taking a contract from somebody who wants you to do some work for them, but you still say we're doing OD, but maybe it's really not using OD practices. So, organization effectiveness, performance, and developing capabilities. I think that's always needs to be one of our common purposes. So we want to try to make our work include some thinking that relates to how effective is the organization becoming? Is the performance improving or not improving? And is the system getting more capabilities to not have to rely on outside or a lot of other inside people to consult with because the people in the system start learning how to do this. Partnering with the system. And this is something that took me at least 20 years in my career to learn clearly about what a difference it can make. And partnering with the system means it's a critical relational element. And we are often hired by leaders who think of us as vendors that can do whatever they ask us to do, or they do not think of you with respect as a partner bringing something that can really help their organization. They're not seeing it that way. So I think the partnering is something that we need to pay more attention to up front. And what I said is it took me 20 years, is after 20 years, I turned down more contracts than I accepted for that reason that I learned that we didn't have the right relationship between me and the leader. And so what's important about that is this partnering thing. What it does, it provides a better outcome because the expertise of the leader and their history, plus the expertise that you bring about change, can be integrated well together as long as there's trust, openness, and a good relationship. And I think that's what partnering needs to be. Collaborating and guiding the system's people, not doing it for them or telling them what to do. And we sometimes cross over those boundaries ourselves. Management consultants are hired to do that. That's how they are paid. And the difference when OD was formed was a different philosophy. And the philosophy was we need to collaborate and guide and help people learn how to build the changes they need to change. And so that's one of the other things that I think is a common purpose. Creating learning for the system, that is with unknowns and things that aren't experienced, and the counter to the current system, the counter things to the current system. We used to spend a lot more time. I know when I first started and when I was coming out of my doctoral program and stuff, we paid a little more attention to how much learning needs to be occurring if we are going to make a change work. But now I don't find learning always being built in. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. A lot of times, all the decisions are made, and then the only learning that comes is a form of training saying, train these people how they're going to do the new work. And the problem with that is it came too late. So I think we need to create learnings for the system and the people along the way. And then finally, we need to leave systems and people in a better status than wherever we start. And that used to be in my ear from the original founders that I met and worked with. They always were saying, you've got to realize that however we do our work, we need to leave people in a better place. And I think that's the other core common purpose. Now, the second one, critical. Systemic scope and depth. We need to understand systems because systems theory has been taught for many, many years in OD, but sometimes it's only one course, and sometimes people don't ever really get to practice it very well. And so I think that we do have to scope the change with which systems are involved in this. And then the word intervening comes from systems thinking, and it's the way in which we take actions in the system that help to loosen the system or shift the system or move the system in another way. And so everything we deal with needs to be considered in systemic thinking. And what we do with the intervening is we then figure out what are the action steps that we have to do. And that has always been the way I've thought about it. But I can tell you, there are many, many clients I've been in where some leader will always have their opinion about what should happen, and they will keep a lot of these other steps to be eliminated. And that's why I started to see my own work not getting what I thought it really could get. And that's when I knew I had to I had to work with people who understood that even though the problem may be showing up in Department A, the reality is Department A may be interdependent with Department C and D. And if that's the case, then there's systemic dynamics that are occurring all the time. And if we're only changing in a piece of it, we're missing out the systemic side of the change. And and then the next thing is the social and technical optimization is critical in systems. And the wonderful people from from England long time ago who created social technical thinking and social technical systems, And they had a lot of things that they did in that process, but the core concept is all I'll talk about. That is technology. Technology was not changing a whole lot in the 1970s. That's when they were starting all this, and that's when they were experimenting. But they were still finding ways that the machines and the tools that they were using were overpowering how the human systems could have worked better with it. Because the human system point of view was never connected with the technology point of view. And guess what? Here we are in the 21st century, and the technology and social sides are still as equally critical, but the optimization isn't happening today either. And so we need to be looking at the optimization as what's the best way for the technology to work, but not alienate or make the human job a boring job. So what is the role of the human person in any task that they're doing? And what is the automatic or technology piece that is in the same task? And that's something that I just see as a second core essence. We have to think that way no matter what we're asked to do. We have to look at it as if there's a bigger globe. There's always a bigger whole. So then we have to talk about the data that we use or don't use. I call them systemic representative data-based assessment of what the current situation is. And it's not difficult to do. It's something that we used to do and took way too long because we had to interview a lot of people. We had to collect a lot of surveys. We had to do focus groups. We had to do 15 different ways. I think today there's a couple of things that can help us, but I've also learned that sometimes we're not even doing this. We need the data and not just people's opinions. And we need to help determine that within the system, what needs to change, what are the needs should change focus and inclusion. What do we need to include once we understand what's happening in the current system? And to collect this data, you have to think about different levels of people in the organization. And you also have to think about diagonally across the organization so that you're getting the perspectives that people's experience will tell you it's very different depending on where they're working. And if a leader, as many used to tell me, no, all you have to do is get data from the senior group and then we can move ahead, because they're just trying to push it and get it done fast. And I did some of that myself with them. And the reality is, in the end, I think they missed a lot of things, and that's why the changes didn't go as well as they should. So I think that's one thing we need to do a better job with. And the fourth one is my favorite lately is our use of self as the primary instrument of change. Not everybody understands it, but it's been around the OD field for a long time. There was never much literature on it. It was mostly passed down. In the last 15 years, there's been more people writing about it. I've spent most of my last 15 years dealing with this issue that we call use of yourself as the primary instrument of change. And that means, and the reason for that is because everything that takes place are taken in, seen, and understood by us. And so our filters carry some influence on that. Our history, our patterned behaviors all help us either collect data and bring it into ourselves or not see it all because we have blind spots. And then you are deciding what to do based on things that come into you. This is just you between you and another person, or you as a leader besides the whole organization. It doesn't make any difference. The choices you make for your behavior come from data that comes in through your six senses. And so we have to learn a lot about how to use ourselves as the primary thing that helps the organization get changed. So it starts with that partnership leadership. It's how you show up and how you get along is going to make a big difference as to whether you and the leader are going to listen to each other or not. So that's another piece of it. Then 5 is using value-based thinking in how people are treated and how changes are designed and executed. The values need to be operationalized, and sometimes they're not. And if you look at all the different lists of OD values over the years, they've been fairly similar, even with changes once in a while. And it's not just that it's just those values. It's that we're always using values as we're thinking and watching how are people being treated, and then how are people going to be involved in what we design and execute for change. And so that's the reason why this becomes a core essence. And when we don't do it and when we slip on it, that usually gets in the way of our endings and our successes. So here's some of those that I think stand out. And one is humanistic thinking and behaviors. Doesn't mean that's the only thing that's important, but it's very important when you think about how people feel about working where they are and how people feel like they're treated, or if they're respected, or if they're simply told what to do all the time, and so their own knowledge isn't even being tapped. The impact of people's participation. So I say that impact in any way, meaning your job's going to change, the way you're going to do work is going to change. You might lose your job even. So the question, these are impacted people, but do they have participation in working on the change, which I've noticed is not done a lot. And part of that is because of project management running an awful lot of the changes, so that project teams are formed, but they're not made up of people who actually have to make change. They are people building something to tell those people what they need to do. And I've watched that happen alongside of me all the time. I try not to make that happen when I get enough control with the leader. So they need to have voice, they need to have impacts, they need to have roles in learning and building capability for change. They need to help with decisions, and they need to be engaged and bring in their networks of people to be engaged so that changes don't have to work over boulders of resistance over and over and over again. Learning, developing, and growing for the individuals. That is, they should all come out learning more, being developed, and again, being able to improve their work. And the system has to have the same thing. So if you think about individual and system, both are always needing to be developed and growing in some form so that they're reaching better potential. So the system runs better, it's more efficient and more effective. How the people are better because they learn new skills and they can expand their work or they can move to another job. Either of those things will help the whole system. And then improving the effectiveness and capabilities of the people in the organization. So that's similar to the other one. And then my favorite new phrase is bringing the right people together in any changes. And I think the big question I have now when I'm starting at the front end of a contract or a front end of just working with a team trying to figure out how they could do a change, you start off by thinking about who all is impacted, how does the change going to affect different parts of our whole organization? Our whole organization could be 50 people or it could be 500,000 people. It's just the level of complexity is all that's different. And so we need to bring the right people together to work on the change. And that includes a lot of different things. It can be right because they're impacted and it's going to mean a lot to them. They can be the right people because they're very good with change. They've already had experience in that. Another reason is they could be very experienced with the company. So they've been there long enough to understand the interactions inside of their system. So those are the kinds of things when I say who are the right people. And then the last ones are I like to call this customized work. And we have so many 100,000 techniques and methods and 5-step this and 7-step that. And since that's what we became used to, a lot of people got very addicted to one or two. And so before they ever collected any piece of data, they walk in the door to some organization and they already know what they're going to do. They just don't know how they're going to start it up. And so customized work means the client system and the culture that they have are two of the things that make a difference in how it needs to be customized so people in this system will understand the change, can become committed to the change, can become engaged in doing some of the change work, or without this, without being customized, they can just start resisting methods that people are trying to lay on them. So it's nice to know all thousands of techniques you can learn. The reality is you have to make individual choices, I think, in every system. And I know when I didn't do it, and I know when I learned to do it. It made a big difference in my life. The what's, how's, who's, where's, and when's. That's just my simple way of saying is exactly what we need to determine every time. And it needs to be designed and it needs to be executed for the specific system that they're in and the changes they're trying to make. So you put all those things together, and it's pretty hard to make that generic. There has to be some things that are customized to the organization and its system. And then the last one is change involves both behavioral change and organizational changes. And sometimes people only measure one or the other. Some people are only interested in what's the performance output for this organization. But what they don't understand is what behaviors need to change to make that happen. So applied behavioral science was at the core base of OD from its founding in 1950s and 60s. That's when it was really started. And applied behavioral science is one of the pieces we should always understand because it helps us understand the influences that change people's behaviors. And so we need to understand that we have behavioral change as part of a success and organizational system pieces that are shifted in some way that will support the new behaviors and actually get to the goals that we were actually looking for. So applied behavioral science helps us with human behaviors. And I'll tell you the thing I love the most, Lewin's field theory. He created field theory to use a number of different ways, but I started to use it a lot lately in the last 15 years to help people learn about what use of self is about. And here's what he means. He said behavior in any situation has a self in it, who is you, has others, that is other human beings around you, and some kind of a context, that is a history or a culture of an organization or a context that they're working in. So if you go into one meeting with your team, you're going to have one set of interrelationships. If you are a low-level person in an organization and go to talk with the senior people in that organization, you're going to behave differently because the others are going to influence what you're willing to do. And so these kind of things happen over and over and over again in all kinds of situations. So what we need to know when we're doing change and whether we say, yeah, we were successful with this change, we need to talk about it in behaviors that are changing and also pieces of an organization system that are changing. So that's the thinking right now on where I've ended up with, and I think we can carry forward into the future. And the other two words I wanted to put together is processes and technologies. The reason we have process consulting is because Ed Schein and some other people put that together. But the importance of processes is the reason. And I remember talking to Ed about that a number of times. He said, well, many of the organization issues that people keep running into, you can find them in processes that aren't working. So that's one of the reasons that it's important. But the idea of processes and technologies are to help us create efficient, effective, and optimized social technical operations. So when we're doing the technologies, we have to think about both pieces. When we're building processes, we need to think about both pieces. And I think that's something that a lot of us haven't been doing enough of for a long time. And I think it's good that we can do that. And then when we measure change or we evaluate change, maybe we could find a way to bring behavior and organization elements together. So real change needs to be assessed with behaviors and organization systems. Okay. Now, I was going to ask a question again. If anyone's willing to open up and just say, if you have any particular question just about an essence, we can take a few of them here, but we're going to have an opening question and answer very soon anyway. So maybe it's better if, let me just say the last thing that I need to say. And so when I say change has to change, and that is the thing that I've been saying to people for the last 8 or 10 years, I think, because we have to start thinking, how are we going to make this work in a VUCA world when we're actually not so used to that? And here's the model that I used with one of my last clients in a big corporation in California. And you begin with partnering relationships. Who you work with regularly could be one of those relationships, or ones that you will need to work with. You also need to build a partnering relationship and at least one significant person on the senior leader team. You could have more, but it's good to have one. And in this particular way that I designed this, I had one. I had a senior vice president that was the one who brought in the new thinking and was influential enough with the senior leaders to get it done. So I start with that. Second thing is we start with representative systemic data-based assessments. So I get tired of people saying that we don't need any more data because we already know what we need. That's how many times I've heard that. And I said, well, we need to find things in a different way, and we need to find it out from different people's perspective. So we have to get some help, usually from the senior leaders too. Who are the people across this organization that have experience, that have a decent future with you, that have some skills with change, and that are likely very impacted by the kind of changes that we're talking about? So now the question is, how do we get that data? Well, we should use a lot of methods. We cannot do it with all surveys. We cannot do it with all quantitative data. We have to have qualitative data to understand the truth. And so you can get that data different ways. And this is one place where I think AI could potentially help us and speed up the collections of data, or take the data that we gather personally and then build it together in an integrated understanding a lot faster than we might be able to do it. So that's a kind of an example where I think it can happen. And then from using the data and the leaders' thinking, we form an initial change team of the right people. And that's exactly what we did with this place. I got a diagonal set of very good people. In fact, all of those people are higher leaders today than they were then. And so we wanted to participate in understanding what the current state is, and early senses of resistance and support. So where do we think there's likely support and where do we think there's likely resistance? And then change the design, the decisions, etc. Some of the right people will have some skills and be experienced, etc. And okay, and then there's only one more page, I think. The fourth one is communication and sharing with the whole system, because I've noticed that's another place that causes a lot of resistance and alienation. So that is, we need to keep sharing with the whole system the why we're doing things, the what we're doing, and eventually the hows as we determine those. So we want to inform all people and have space for them to provide inputs from here to there to the core team. and then continue with regular updates along the way. So it's improving that piece of work during change. And then last is continue this process with cyclical iterative phases, very much like what action research says to do, where you collect very quick data. And if we set up teams outside across the organization, there could be people there who are regularly, quarterly collecting data in whatever is changing so that they could put that data together fast and we wouldn't have to spend a lot of time to get data. And what the data is saying is, so what's it impacting now? How is it impacting now? And then you make some adjustments, you add some new people if you need to, and you modify the work. And this way you are constantly customizing what needs to happen. And then always find ways to support and honor the people doing the change work. Whoever is going to be doing change work needs to have high support. And you keep the leaderships updated all the time. And then all the impacted and effective people in and out of the organization are some ways communicated with and supported. So that's the general idea. And I ran something very similar to this. And I have to say, and it was 10 years ago, but I have to say it felt like one of the best things I ever got done. And the senior team said the same thing. I mean, they said they never thought this would come out that good. So anyway, now I'll stop and take anything that people might want to talk about in the little bit of time that we have, because we do have a good closing person too.
Thank you so much, Dr. David Jamieson, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We have a question in the chat. So the question was, how can and what we know be embraced by leaders who make the decisions?
Yeah. Well, one of the biggest problems, I think, is the field of organization change has stayed in OD and has not spread out in business schools and stuff very well. And so what I've learned a lot, even with the best leaders, the ones that I was able to really partner with, they respected the expertise on change because they knew they didn't have it. But so many leaders think they are on top of the whole organization and they see everything, but they really don't. And so I think what we need to do sometimes is, this is why coaching can be so helpful to people. And a partnering relationship has built-in coaching because you're listening and talking to each other. So I wish we could get more in through MBAs, because MBAs are the ones who become leaders very often. I wish we could get a little more of OD into MBAs, but if not, we can always do a little bit of training at the beginning of anything and make sure the leader joins in that as well, so that they learn some of the basic concepts about change and how they have to think about it, because I want the leaders to think about it the right way. So, I mean, I think that's a great question and probably even has more answers than what I said, but I've always said that there's very few of them that end up learning a lot about change. Now, I think going forward, if you're a leader, I think you're going to be way more involved in change than you were 30 years ago. So, absolutely.
Thank you. And on behalf of the Workforce Education and OD&C conference organizers, we hope you enjoyed today's session. If we didn't answer your question, please feel free to email us or contact the presenters directly. We would love to hear your feedback on today's webinars. Please take a moment to complete the survey using the link in the chat box. We have more. Also, we are delegated to extend a special innovation to all of you for the Workforce Education and Development OD&C Professional Development Network webinar series. Since 2020, we have been offering free monthly webinars with extraordinary speakers. You will find more information in our website. Please find the link in the chat. Remember, registration for all of our events is completely free and can be found on our website. We want to make sure everyone has the opportunity to join us. You can also stay updated by following us on our social media platforms, including Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook.